Hey guys, you're listening to the Wise Words Book Club, where we scale down some of the best non-fiction books and we give you their key ideas. We teach you how to apply them to the real world and how to benefit from them. So if you're looking to improve or looking to grow, then why not listen to some wise words? Words that make you wise.
So this is the elephant in the brain, part 2. Do we want to quickly sort of summarize? I'm just looking back on my notes from last week.
Let's quickly summarize.
So recap from last week is we discussed this idea of selfish v pro-social motives and how we all as humans like to promote our pro-social motives, such as we did this for the group or we did this because of something which is seen as like acceptable, rather than something that's seen as unacceptable, such as you did it because you were selfishly wanted to achieve something from this transaction, etc. We talked about competition v cooperation and how our minds or our brain has been shaped not just by cooperation, which is what we all want to believe, but by the competing for mates, etc., and also status, etc. We talked about signaling and how we signal our fitness for either mating or power, etc. We talked about social norms and how we punish people who skip social norms, such as gossip. Then we talked a little bit about gossip. Then we talked about norm regulation, which is the same thing. So we regulate people by their intentions. So if people come up with good reasons for doing things, we then sort of trust them. Whereas if they told us the real reasons they did things, we probably look at them a bit weird, like, oh wow, they're trying to do that.
Yeah.
And I think then we did. I think we got onto status, and we talked about dominance and prestige, the two different types. So there's dominance hierarchies where people rule by power, and there's prestige, which is more like people rule by sort of merit and the fact that people look up to them.
And then I think the last bit we touched over cheating in terms of how to get around certain norms, how to show off without actually being called up on it through like cryptic communication, lying, or self-deception.
I think that's quite an interesting one as well. I'm going to quickly talk about cheating as well, because I think one of the points they talked about, I mean, I don't know if I'm restating this from last week, but we're really highly attuned to people's gaze. And that was it's basically evolution's way of telling us that we should be hypersensitive to when people are watching us, because when people are watching us, they see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And if they don't see what we're doing, we can cheat.
Yeah. Well, that's why. Have you been to the newer sort of like supermarkets where the self-checkouts actually have a camera that looks at you and you've got the TV in front of you? Because when people feel like they're being watched, they're less likely to steal something or. And
there was
Yeah.
You made an interesting point. That was, I was just talking to you about my critical management module. That was one of Foucault's theories. That was called the panoptic theory, which is like when you're being watched, you change your behavior, which is just like in my head, obviously entirely true. And it also depends on who's watching you. There's a difference between a policeman watching you and your mate watching you. So that's also interesting. I'm trying to think what else about cheating. Oh yeah, no, the cheating thing, just before we move on to this week, I thought it was quite interesting how this idea of, like you just said, sort of putting things in which aren't obvious so that people see you in a certain way. So my favorite examples are the people on Instagram who take pictures of their I saw one earlier, took a picture of their Starbucks coffee with their Mercedes-Benz wheel in it. They could have taken that photo of the coffee outside of the car, but I'm sure they did it just because the Mercedes logo was there.
No, exactly.
Literally,
the subliminal messages.
Yeah, when you start seeing it, you start realizing it's like, well, you just start realizing most people do it, and I mean, sometimes you can catch yourself doing it, I guess. But another favorite also of mine is when people have like a nice watch and they have to take a photo, but they take a photo with the opposite hand to get the watch in the photo holding something. Or their shoes.
It's quite funny.
And I don't really know who they're kidding, because actually those are quite obvious to me. But anyway,
but you see, that's part of like the norm thing. That, like, for instance, someone might have been able to show off in a different way that we're not allowed to show off anymore. And so it's like a norm is put on to stop that way of showing off, and then we find a different way of being able to show off. And then a norm is like everyone clocks onto that and is like, oh, we don't actually like that. And so someone then finds a different way to get around it.
Sure. I kind of get what you mean. So like in my head, right, a norm at the moment of showing off, which people don't accept, is somebody who just like outright shows off, says, I'm really good at this.
Yeah.
Like, we all know that's pretty socially unacceptable. So now I guess the argument is you have these people who do it subtly. Like maybe they'll invite people over, or they'll invite people to play a game and get people to watch them showing off their like sporting expertise potentially, or I don't know,
I
something
see it quite
similar.
a lot in like clothing. So like you could go out and you could wear like really nice clothing, and it's obvious that you're showing off. You're not saying it, but like it's pretty obvious. And then people clock onto it, and so then what you end up doing is people end up wearing really nice like high brand stuff, but in a way that doesn't accentuate it. And so it's like, as in, you don't look really rich, but you're still wearing a top that's, you know, £200. And then people clock onto that, and then it's like, oh well, now I'm going to buy stuff from like a thrift shop. Do you know what I mean? So it's like you're 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 changing the way you can show off, because like the norms are constantly changing.
Yeah, well, yeah, and also people kind of they don't want people to copy them when they're showing off, so they have to change and adapt as people copy. I guess that's kind
Yeah,
of what fashion is in my head. Fashion's just a never-ending chase to sort of be different and show off, and show your fashionability as you will.
show your identity in a way.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. To be honest, I think it means different things to different people.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a be all and end all, like, you know, oh, you wore a nice coat and so you're an arrogant arsehole.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
some people really do. Like, that's the problem with like trying to put people in
yeah, you
boxes or
can't
trying to
label it.
pigeonhole people too early. Yeah, so I think that roughly recaps everything from last week.
Yeah.
Um, I've got the book here with me, but I'm looking at like the chapter titles. So this is where we're applying the sort of ideas of norms and um, counterfeit reasons. So the idea of we come up with reasons for why we do stuff, even though if it's not the real reason. And it talks about it in different domains. So we've got here body language, laughter, conversation, consumption, art, charity, education, medicine, religion, politics. Um, I don't know where you wanted to start, mate. I feel like we could probably work through them one by
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, I recently I got about 4 or 5 pages into the body language uh, sort of chapter. I don't know if do you remember anything from it?
Well, yeah, so there's like a few things that I could touch on. I think the obvious one is that, you know, you're not stating what your motive is, you're not using words.
Okay.
And so because you can convey things differently through your body. Um, and I think like an interesting part that they were talking about was how it depends on what your environment is. So, for instance, they mentioned like flirting, and a lot of flirting is done in areas where a lot of other people are. And so you want to convey it to them, but you don't want others to know. And so you know, you express it through body language.
Yeah, I think one
Um,
of them was excessive eye contact, if
yeah,
I remember correctly.
yeah, exactly. Because other like third parties can't really see that, you know.
Not unless they're like monitoring it, and not many people are.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, I think you're completely correct. I think one of his main points, which I really liked, was this idea that with language you can effectively lie very easily. With body language, is a lot harder because language is a fairly new sort of evolved tool that we have, whereas body language has always been there. We used to communicate with our bodies before language, so our body language is more
yeah,
honest, I think was his point.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so that yeah, we with our bodies we signal things that we might not want to communicate.
And we would be more in tune to them, because it's like deep down, it's like that's what we started before
Yeah,
language.
we can tell if somebody's sad without them even telling us if their
Yeah,
head's down right and their
yeah,
body
yeah,
language, like their shoulders are curved, etc. Um, but yeah, for me that was just one of the most interesting parts. This idea that um, yeah, it's hard to lie with body language, and when you do, you look like you're lying. So
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because like the thing is, like, not everyone's so attuned to being able to pick out, you know, certain body languages. Some people obviously like don't clock on at all. Um, but I think a lot of them is like they're trying to drown out their honest behavior from their body by talking. And it's like the pretty motive is the talking, and the like ugly motive is the sort of is the body. And
yeah,
so it's like the louder I talk, the more misdirection I can create, then the more you take away from like not looking at my body, and you take in the pretty motive. I think something that was quite interesting, he talked about confidence, and how confidence attracts people. Because the idea is like, if I want to be open, okay, then I can attract people to come to me, but I can also attract like attackers or dangers. But if I'm confident, then it shows that I can welcome those attackers, you know, and it makes me look even stronger.
yeah.
um,
I think yeah, you're right. It was like slow speaking. If you if you speak slowly and you're calm all the time, even when somebody's attacking you, you're almost showing off your alpha male position. So if you're
Yeah.
like body's open and you don't flinch, for example.
Like you're taking a risk. The risk is that like you want the benefits of other people being able to see you, because confidence means like, you're expressing these prestige states, these prestigious states, like, you're higher up the social status ladder. So you're advertising that people are attracted to you, but then it does come with a risk, because then someone could like, you know, uh, knock you off your pedestal a bit.
Yeah, I think one of the other interesting, probably the last point that I had on this was the idea that because it's inherently quite vague, body language that is, you can defend it. So let's just say you held excessively long eye contact with your mate's girlfriend, and they were to ask you like, or they were trying to confront you based on you potentially flirting, you could deny it. Whereas if you said something, is harder to deny, especially if it was inappropriate.
Yeah,
But at
yeah,
least
yeah,
with the eye contact, you can kind of get away with it. I think that's one of the points that people use body language to get away with things because it's vague and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what they're doing.
yeah. And it's hard to describe it to other people. It's like, how do I describe your body behavior to someone else? You know,
Yeah.
um, where it's much easier to be like, oh, he said this or she said that.
Of course, yeah, it's way more concrete. It's a lot easier to pin somebody down for saying something inappropriate than sort of winking or something, because winking can mean friendliness as well in other contexts,
Yeah,
um, which gives it that deniability. So,
I think a thing to point out in terms of eye contact as well. He talks about them in different hierarchies. So, like, obviously, we talked about dominance and prestige last week, but where eye contact within dominant hierarchy is more like information. So a person higher up the ladder will look at you more to gain information from the other person, and the person lower down on the ladder will like look away, yet they still want some information, so they'll glance here and there. But the more confident, the more like, dominant one will own the information, whereas it's very different with like prestige, whereas eye contact is seen more of like attention. You're giving something rather than taking it. And so, yeah, both are more likely to be in like a prestigious hierarchy. They're both more likely to hold eye
yeah,
contact.
yeah. To be honest, I forgot about that point, but that it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Where it's appropriate and not appropriate kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, okay, mate. I was going to move on to sort of humor and laughter
yeah,
here.
yeah,
I think you'll quite like this one because this brings into this idea of like deniability.
yeah.
But one of the it's one of those things that we never really truly think about what role laughter plays in our life.
Hmm.
We all know we want to be around people who make us laugh or can have a joke, who can don't take themselves too seriously, right? Um, and I think their way of describing laughter in general was a play signal, and I also think it's very central to understanding who's like uh, who you can bond with and who you can't. Because when you tell like a joke, if somebody laughs, they're almost immediately saying to you like, "Ha, that was funny. Like I like you. This is fun." Or
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
that's the kind of vibe. That's the kind of signal. Sorry, they send back to you. So this idea that laughter and humor is actually a way of sort of almost bonding and showing people that you two are on the same wavelength.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think we've talked about this in terms of like parties. When you go to like a party and at the beginning of the night, everyone's cracking jokes, everyone's laughing, and the idea is that because you can express truth within a joke, okay, um, it means that like you're trying to find other people. If other people laugh at it, they accept the truth, okay. But as soon as someone's like, "Oh, I don't find that funny," you know that you've overstepped that line. Um, and yet you still have the plausible deniability to be like, "Oh no, it was just a joke." Okay, so you're safe, but you're still trying to find other people that you have these commonalities. And then by the end of the party, you're normally talking about fucking politics or whatever, but it just goes to show that like you found that line where everyone's at, and then you can actually talk to them about that actual truth and be like, okay, and you take that concept that you put in the joke and now you just put it into like a natural normal conversation.
Sure. I'm going to ask you about plausible deniability in a second. But one other thing I think is it's not even just about finding truth. It's also almost like breaking the ice as well. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, let's just calm ourselves down. We're all a bit nervous. If somebody can make you laugh, it just releases tension.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like saying you're safe in my environment because I'm going to make you laugh. And usually a laughter comes from like self deprivation. So the person's obviously just taking the piss out of themselves, and it makes you realize that like this guy isn't going to be upset. I think one of the key things that he doesn't really talk about in the book, but I like this idea that when you are self-depreciative towards yourself, you basically signal to somebody else that is okay. You're not going to get upset by things. If
Yeah.
you kind of get me,
Yeah.
because anybody who holds himself in really high esteem is people don't want to tread on people's toes because they realize, oh, if they do that, they might get upset. So basically, by making a joke on your own, sort of making yourself look worse, they go, oh wow, that person obviously confident enough to take the piss out of
Yeah,
himself.
exactly.
He's a good person to be around. I don't need to watch what I'm saying. So it's almost back to that the book about impossible conversations, mate. You're modeling the behavior you want to see. You're modeling to them that you're willing to take the piss out of yourself. Therefore, it's safe to say stuff around me because I don't take stuff too seriously, and that's why humor is really important. But yeah, sorry, you said you talked about plausible deniability. I wanted you to sort of explain it a little bit better, just because I feel like some people might not really know what it means.
Yeah, makes sense. Just the idea that like if we are breaking these norms or whatever, the way to break them is people to have certainty that you've broken them. They need to be able to like show that you've broken a rule. But if they can't, then it's very hard for them to pick you up on it. Hence why like so body language, you can't read body language. It's much harder because there's so many different it's very vague. There could be so many different factors at play. And the same with like joking, you have the excuse of saying, "Oh, wait a minute, okay, like this was I was just joking."
So what you're saying is you it's allowing yourself to say something controversial, which breaks a norm or something that people might find unacceptable, but you do it in a way where you go, if they go, "Oh, that was bad," you go, "Well, I was joking." That's your point, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't basically you're avoiding accountability, right? You're avoiding accountability for something, and you're working out where people stand. So you say it, and then if they respond badly, you now know, wow, that person cares about that. So you can't. It's almost like an information. Like the way I see it is like digging out
It's like a
information from
feedback.
people.
Yeah, and that's why like humor is amazing because you're basically sending out this signal to see if you get feedback from other people, and then if people are laughing, you know that you can pursue that. Otherwise, if people don't and they pick you up on it, you can have the excuse, but you can also just know that, okay, well, I'm not going to go there with them.
Yeah.
And like that happens all the time. I think about how many people have like very dark sense of humor. Like I myself have one, but that doesn't mean everyone does. So you can't say the same sort of jokes, Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I think another bit like sort of use of humor is actually we kind of touched on it before, but it's actually bonding. So like this is back to what we touched last week, where it's like your close friends can take the piss out of you and have better jokes than somebody who just meets you, because this is a signal of saying we know each other well. I can like rip into this guy and he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because obviously you don't just meet somebody for the first time and be like, nice tie, douche. Like, do you know what I mean? It's not. Whereas your mate can say that to you and it'd be quite funny.
And people have like different types of humor, and like I feel like I think personally I've never read anything about this, but I think you adapt to your environment's humor. So like there are different types of humor. I used to have like mates that I live with, and they're very like sketch like. You like almost do like a sketch, and it's like funny like that. And you portray jokes through that way. Otherwise, there could be people that like actually tell kind of jokes. And I think you adapt to your environment depending on the humor.
Sure. Yeah, no, of course you do, because you're working out the social boundaries. So, but that's the point of humor in a sense as well, as working out like what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's funny in this group, and your body sort of calibrates to it.
Yeah.
Like I would imagine that if you spend, let's just say you don't find a particular type of joke funny, but your best friend crowd do, over the course of spending time with them, I would assume or theorize that you would eventually start to find that stuff. Yeah, but mate, there's a reason why that exists.
Yeah.
The whole idea of you corrupt your friends, of course there is, because they tell you what's normal in the group, and unless of course they let you off the hook by saying it's okay if you don't follow the rules we're playing by, but you'll then also feel alienated, right? So let's say you come into a group and they're all laughing at this joke and you're not. You either one, leave the group, or two, learn to find it funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise you're going to feel like shit when they're all laughing about something and you're sat there going, "Oh, this is like funny, but it's not funny." which is why I think it's quite interesting. This is probably the reason for all this disgusting stuff that apparently happens on WhatsApp groups where people, like especially bloke groups, send disgusting messages, because
Yeah.
what happens is over time nobody stops them and they become a self-reinforcing cycle of
Yeah.
either racism or sexism, and because there's no like stop point. And arguably, maybe they're not even being serious, right? They're just trying to show they're taking their group thing to an extreme. Like, do
Mm.
they act on it? I don't know. If you get me, but it's more like showing off. It's like a showing off in group thing. Like, look at me, I'm going to be the most ridiculous person in this group, and I'm going to say the most ridiculous thing
Yeah.
because now I'm part of you guys, but I've taken it to the extreme. And
Yeah, it is that. It's this constant like trying to outdo the other person, and
yeah,
it gets darker and darker. And then the problem is you move so far away from your whatever a normal humor level is. But then
hmm
I reckon it's like you move so far away that then it's almost normal to be in this like dark sense of humor.
sure. And that's usually when you hear stuff going on in the news because it's gone too far. But
Yeah,
then there is a point when it gets too far, but that's probably a topic for another time. Um, I think for me, that's pretty much everything on
yeah,
humor.
I think so.
Next one I've got is conversation.
Yeah,
So I think I don't know if we touched on it at all last time, but I quite like this one because
I
it's
don't think so.
the
Yeah,
idea that speaking is a function of showing off.
yeah,
And I really like this idea. I think you've brought it up a few times, maybe not on the podcast, but between us, like this idea of like information and talking is showing off your toolkit as a person.
yeah, yeah,
So the way somebody can talk about specific things that are happening, like problems, etc., is showing off to his friends the ideas and the toolkit, as you will, the mental toolkit they have, and we're all like judging each other every time we're with each other, like through like what he likes to call it, like a job interview.
yeah,
Like essentially, that's kind of what it is. Every time we meet somebody, we're talking to them, we're listening to them, we're thinking, are they interesting? Would they be a good friend? Would they be good at this? Or like, do you got me? You
yeah,
are
yeah,
playing these judgment things in your head, which I quite like this idea that so then conversation does become a level of like showing off and showing that you know stuff and showing that you're doing stuff and show if you kind of get me. And
yeah.
that's what every conversation kind of is.
Well, you're kind of like showing your hand, really. It's like you're looking for certain traits or that in others that you would like, and yet to do that, you have to put like your cards online to show if they want any of your cards. You know, it's like a Yu-Gi-Oh swap or that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, oh, I've got this card. I know you want that. Let's see if you've got any cards that I want, and then that's what comes out in conversation.
sure.
Um, you're just trying to figure out where they fit in and how they help you or work for you.
Yeah, I think it was yeah, this whole idea that like speaking helps you show off your tools. Um, I think it's quite interesting as well if you think about all the people who are quite shy and they really miss out on this opportunity to show off what they know to a degree.
Yeah,
Um, I was thinking a lot about it, but this idea that like the shy people don't like people who talk too much because they think they're showing off.
mm.
But that's kind of in my head now. That's quite an accurate
Yeah, it's a
diagnosis of
very
people who
accurate.
do
Yeah,
speak too much because they're actively trying to show that they're the loudest or they got the most interesting stories. Like we all know there's people who like butt in when you're in the middle of something, or like it's back to that the impossible conversations, mate, where you say something right and then somebody creates a story about what you just said in their own life.
yeah,
So you'll be talking about business and they'll be, oh, I remember this time in business in my business or something. If you kind of get me,
yeah,
and they just detract from what you're saying. But that is just another example of this idea that speaking is a function of showing off.
yeah. And I think like there's probably a difference between someone who's just loud and someone who talks but has like things to get to offer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder how this ties. I've never thought about this, but like I wonder how it ties in with like extroversion, introversion, in terms of like introverts don't feel they need to say something unless they want to say it.
Therefore, when they say something, it's usually more meaningful, I
Yeah,
would think.
exactly.
But they also choose to do more doing than
Yeah,
talking. You get me? I would assume introverts do more of the actual acting rather than talking about the acting. If you kind of get me.
yeah, probably.
As a general overall difference, I'll probably assume that would be the case. But I haven't read anything on that. But
Like I remember reading Susan Cain's book Quiet.
oh yeah,
Um,
is that good?
I enjoy.
Bloody hell, you didn't sound very sure then, mate.
No, there,
Jesus.
there were some like very interesting points in it. The problem is I find so much like contradictory information. I find it hard. Like I think introversion and extroversion is quite like I don't know, a strange topic because
Well, it's also not binary, like we spoke about
yeah,
many times before. It's not
sorry.
like you're either an extrovert or you're an introvert. It's
Yeah,
like you're on a
exactly. It's
spectrum.
a spectrum, and like you could be like in the middle. They call them ambiverts, but
But mate, for me, you could be an extrovert at a party and an introvert at a dinner party because your family's there. Do you get me? There is like
yeah, yeah,
people have different areas they feel comfortable in. So
yeah.
it's not even just like extrovert, introvert. It's like extrovert in areas you feel comfortable, introvert in areas you don't feel comfortable, and it's kind of like that for most people, I would assume. So it's kind of almost like a false idea to a degree because it's also context dependent. But
Yeah, so this is the
that's,
thing. Like, yeah, I see a lot of that, but I also then like there was a point that Susan Kane made where like it's to do with your uh nervous system, and like you're more sensitive to stimuli. And so if you're
okay.
born like that, then like does it change over time, or does it stay static, or like I don't know, or does it change depending on your environment, like you just said? But I don't know. Anyway, bit off topic. Let's bring it back.
Yeah, I for me that's all the stuff I got for conversation. Unless you have any
Yeah,
more
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
ones.
pretty much.
Um, and now we're going to move on to consumption, which I think is quite a broad one. Um, because it's all about like purchases, and obviously we purchased a lot of things. I think my biggest takeaway was this idea that we we think we're buying stuff for ourselves, but what we tend to do is we actually buy stuff to give off an impression to
Mm,
other people.
yeah,
So we buy like a really nice car, and we'll rationalize to ourselves, right? That the reason why we're getting it is because it has the best miles per gallon, or because it's got, I don't know, a really beautiful design, or it's an electric car. But in reality, quite a lot of those decisions, if it's affordable to you, don't get me wrong, if you can't afford this expensive product, you won't.
but that's exactly it. It's relative.
Yeah, but it's also it's manipulation of your. It's like it's one of those motives you don't really see because you don't talk. They don't. Nobody's ever going to say, "I bought this to impress you." Like nobody ever will say that. So it's all the other reasons. But I think the idea of this was the third person effect. So this is back to what I said last week about the Super Bowl. Like the Super Bowl ads are so expensive because what it does is it shows such a large amount of people a particular product and a particular price point for a product. So if everybody saw
Yeah,
that in this ad that the new Rolex watch is being worn by Roger Federer, everybody now knows that that Rolex watch is expensive and is associated with Roger Federer. Therefore, when you buy it, you know other people know it's expensive. So it's almost like you like you buy the expensive item because you know somebody else knows it's expensive. Because if otherwise, why would you buy it?
yeah, yeah. No, very true. Like thing is, like I just said before, it's very relative. If you're a billionaire, you might buy a bigger boat, but if you're like just normal, you might just buy a better watch. But then you get people that like try to go too far out of their like environment, and they like spend so much on something that just almost people can't relate to. It's like if someone like our age suddenly bought like a massive, I don't know really what's the equivalent. Like I was going to say a yacht, but no one no one our age would be able to afford one.
No, I
um
guess our age would probably be like a really nice car. To be honest, I don't
but
know.
it'd be too obvious. Do you know what I mean? So it's like I wonder if you have to keep it within a certain bracket. um
Depends how rich you are.
yeah,
I don't know, mate. This is all to me. This reminds me. This whole idea is like game theory. It's like these people actually kind of do know they're doing it for the wrong reasons, but they kind of hide it. For example,
yeah,
somebody might be like, right, well, I could buy this £50,000 car, but I'm going to buy this £20,000 car because then it makes me look like, well, I'm kind of rich, but I'm not going to show it off. I'm going to buy this one because I'm kind of laying it down that I can do it, but I'm not going to go all the way or something
yeah,
like that. It's but every person is different, right?
yeah,
And I think the main takeaway for me wasn't even the fact that it's all about showing off your luxury or showing off your wealth. It's this idea that you buy products to make impressions.
yeah,
Um, to take it away from this sort of luxury example, because I think we're giving people the wrong idea. The idea of buying something because it wasn't manufactured with child labor. So the
yeah,
fact that it was child labor or sort of terrible conditions free manufacturing, just to sort of impress other people that you care. Do you get me?
yeah, yeah.
It's not even just about showing off your wealth. It's actually showing off your
Yeah.
values.
It's the same with like green, like eco-friendly, like clothes or things like that.
Hmm.
It's just to
Hmm.
show that like, oh, it's a trait that I have. I care about the world, or I care about
Yeah.
this. But the actual motive is to get other people's attention. It's not so much that you care about. Like you might care about the world to a certain degree, but there's multiple factors.
Yeah, you buy it because you know other people know that this brand is eco-friendly, or
Yeah,
you it's like kind of, I think, his idea about going traveling as well, because it sends a message about your open-mindedness, your courage. Um, but I tell you what, one of the most interesting things I thought about was this idea that, so fine, a thought experiment, to anybody listening. We all know the feeling when you put on a bit of clothing and it really doesn't fit you. Like, you kind of look at yourself and think, ah, that's not me. Um, this just shows you how well you've like constructed who you are in your head,
yeah,
if you kind of get me, to make a particular set of like impressions to other people.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
let's just say you put on this jacket, you're like, oh, that's not me, because it's a bit like, I don't know, vibrant or something. It's a bit too colorful, and I'm a bit like dreary. I'm a bit black or something. Or sorry, not bit black. I wear black clothing. um, but you kind of get what I mean. You see yourself as that person who wears that type of clothes,
Yeah.
and you know everybody else sees you that person, so you avoid change because you're scared of the ridicule that when you change, people will notice.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, no, it's true, but it's not. It's novelty, isn't it, as well?
but like, no, but the thing is, mate, I think we're very sensitive to novelty within ourselves to a
Yeah,
degree, if it's openly novel. So you like novelty maybe if you were hidden behind closed doors and you could try out a new dance, but you wouldn't be open to novelty in front of people because it would be embarrassing, so you wouldn't be very good at it. But
yeah.
it's the same with clothes. You'll be open to trying on new clothes when you're not being seen by other people, because you can, like, it's private.
I think that goes back to the whole confidence thing, like we were talking about before. Like, if you wear something that's so out there, but that you
Mhm.
like, if you're super confident in it, you can, you can attract people, and then you can also attract people that are like, haters, or people that like don't like it. But if you can
True.
cope with that, then it shows confidence, and you all know those kinds of people that like dress really wacky, but they own it.
Yeah.
They're like, and it's confidence in them. It's like, fuck, I wish I could kind
You're,
of
you're,
dress like
you're
them.
kind of right. Yeah. No, I completely get what you mean. It's like the ability to wear that clothes shows your confidence, and it's almost like part of wearing that clothes is just say, "Look at me, I'm brave."
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Um, but yeah, I mean, the consumption covers such a wide range. Like, it comes from sort of the clothes you wear to the other types of purchases. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, you buy even an Xbox. To be honest, like, as weird as it sounds, you kind of do it to signal your loyalty to a group or your friendship group that all has one.
yeah,
A lot of your purchases, basically, I think the end point is that you think you're doing it for yourself, but quite often you're doing it because it gives yourself like a perception from other people's perspective.
yeah.
So
No, exactly.
I think one of his points was like Corona beer, and I don't know, I can't actually, was it Corona beer? But anyway, some sort of beer, and it was like why advertising now has gone to this point where you even associate beers with specific type of values and traits,
Yeah,
because that way you can identify who you are by the beer you choose. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
not me personally, but I can see why that would affect people. Like, for example, maybe in fact, do you know what, but the perfect example would actually not even be beers, because beers are all similar price point. This is back to the luxury thing. It'd be bottles of wine and the different price points. Like, knowing that your one is like £300, you're sort of signaling, like, look at me. This was expensive.
Yeah, and
Um,
it like, yeah, I think that's very true. You have all these sort of qualities that are associated to the item itself. Like you were just saying, like with beers, I can think, Coors Light is kind of what you use at like an American frat house, but
mhm.
you wouldn't take like loads of, I don't know, coronavirus, or like, Rotten House
Coronavirus.
pills, or like
Do
a
you mean COVID?
coronavirus. Wow, that
Yeah,
just goes to show you how much I've said corona in like a sort of virus context rather than a beer.
yeah. Fair
I
play.
should get back to drinking beer.
Yeah, stop drinking that
Fucking
coronavirus, mate.
hell.
It's not good for you.
Yeah. Bloody hell.
um, and we'll move swiftly on from the consumption then, mate. We don't
Yeah.
want to judge you for your weird takes.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I think the next one for me, I have to grab the book again, but the next thing I got notes on is art. Just have a little look.
Did you
I
say
think it is
art?
art. Yeah, it is art.
Yeah. Um, I think art's quite like an interesting one, actually. Um, it's like, I think he talks about a lot in terms of art doesn't necessarily get you what you want in terms of, uh, shelter, food, sex, those kinds of things. But it's a signal to show that you can waste time, and so that you don't need to be finding those things. And so, in
Finding what
that,
things? Sorry,
sorry,
finding what things?
as in like finding sex, food, shelter, like money, that like power.
Yeah,
Um, but it shows you that you can waste time, and wasting time is seen like, well, if he can waste time, then he's probably got all this stuff already. And so it's kind of like a signal to show that, he's, it gets it indirectly.
I was going to make a point. I was going to be like, I think you should be very careful saying that to all. If any artists ever listen to this, that they're just wasting time. You do art, so you just waste your
Yeah,
time.
yeah. No, that's in like it depends what way you're looking at it, but if food was your top priority, you wouldn't be doing a painting about it.
Yeah,
So doing a painting would assume like, oh, he's probably already got food. He's probably already fed
yeah,
himself. Um,
yeah.
and so it's a signal to grab people's attention.
I think the other perspective of it as well was similar to sport. Is this idea of like showing your ability, like showcasing that
Yeah.
you are a fit, like you are mating worthy because you've got a really good skill and you've proven that you can dedicate yourself to something, and that like people can't emulate what you do. And when
Mm.
people can't emulate what you do, it means like you're sort of, I don't know, it's just like, it's like the way I look at sort of, if you watch these animal programs and you see the weird wacky things they do to attract mates, such as like build nests and dance like birds. It's just funny, like the ones that do the most extreme dances show off their like skill the best,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
therefore
yeah, yeah.
win over the woman. And I kind of see it through that lens. Um, I think the other point you made about art was this idea of like linking to the skill was, um, showing the skill and the effort is crucial to how
Yeah,
people perceive the art. So, like, I like this idea of if it's chiseled out of marble, like in the past, that shows some serious level of like. Think about it, okay? So the way I see it now is with computers. If you're doing like art on a computer and you get it wrong, you got like an undo button.
yeah,
And his point was back in the past, like sort of, I don't know, maybe Roman, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but they used to like carve out a marble. If you make one chunk wrong, you have to start
yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that to me is like dedication and skill to art. Then, going on Adobe Photoshop and, coloring something in, oh, you make a mistake, oh, undo.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Basically what I see it as is like art has to be, you almost have to show that you
High
put in a
risk,
load of effort and it's high risk, and
high
that,
risk
yeah,
of failure. Um,
sure.
yeah, but the reward is higher if you succeed.
Well, people perceive it as a better piece of art because you've done something risky almost. So there's almost like a level of like, yeah, like I said, the effort is part of the evaluation.
Yeah, that's yeah, because I think he talks about it in terms of, you can get these copies of paintings, you know, but it's the difficulty that we like about it. It adds value. It's like oh, it was incredibly hard to carve that marble, and so we love that. But if you did that on a 3D printer and it was exactly the same, no one would care as much, you
Of
know.
course, especially when something's mass manufactured, it becomes too cheap,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
I like this. He talked about the test they did where somebody said basically it was the same piece of artwork, and they had people sort of evaluate how good they thought the artwork was, and the prime before they evaluated it was one was told that a group of artists did it, and one was told that a single artist did it, and they always voted the single artist as being more impressive.
Yeah,
So this obviously clearly shows that sort of link to effort.
yeah,
And then he talked quite rightly about like people like the original, not the replica, which I thought was also quite
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
It makes it because then you can like it's another way of implicitly showing off, isn't it? If you owned a fake, you wouldn't be able to show off as much as if you owned an original painting and it was like, this is literally by the man himself.
yeah, of course. I mean, everybody wants the original, not the fake. Sort of. That's why I guess the argument for like stuff like Rolexes and watches, which you can obviously find cheaper, like, and you can probably find the fakes, right? For most things, including designer brands, but you always feel like a bit of a fake if you don't get the original kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And I feel like that's quite important for like how brands sort of survive.
yeah,
Um, but that's all I got for art, mate. I
yeah.
think.
Same here, same here.
I believe it
I think the
is
next one is
charity.
charity.
Charity. Yeah. Did you want to lead the way? Because I've got like the thing here in my notes. I've got like the 5 factors in giving. So the sort of it's quite interesting as well. In fact, I'm going to jump into the 5 factors.
Yeah, go ahead.
The whole point is like we think people give to charity for obviously to be charitable and because they're good natured and they obviously have everybody's best hearts in mind. But they didn't. I want to say it was an experiment, or they basically some academics have identified the 5 factors which influence the amount given in a charitable situation. So I think the experiment was end of church or an end of a church ceremony, and somebody's going around collecting money for the church itself or something like that. And they found or isolated 5 particular factors which led people to give more.
Mm.
So one of them was visibility. So people were tended to give more when they're being watched. Two was peer pressure. So let's just say the person next to you probably put in more than you, or somebody was so you've seen your friend do it, put in £10, you're more likely to give in £10 or more because you see that the social norm.
Mm.
Third was proximity, so you're more likely to give to a local cause and a global cause, hence
Yeah,
why
yeah,
you're probably more likely to want to save somebody from a natural disaster in your own country than somewhere else. Another one was relatability. So this is the idea that you give it more to people who are identifiable and there's like a story, hence the reason why all charity ads are like story based rather than fact based. They're not like, oh, a million people are dying because of this. They're like this one girl's like life story kind of thing. And then five, the other one was the mating motive. So when people were primed with like a sexual image, they became more generous, particularly males, that is.
yeah.
um
Typical.
and yeah, of course, yeah. So those are the five factors in given, but what they all say to me, right, especially the visibility, peer pressure, mating, um, is that charitable giving is influenced by things which are like, sorry, other people.
Yeah,
If you get me,
yeah, yeah,
mating, visibility, and peer pressure is all other people. There's not one thing in there saying five factors in giving was how nice this person was,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Like I see it all the time in terms of like you see it all the time with like celebrities, and when they're like, I
Yeah,
just gave $1 million to this person. But I think if you cared about the actual cause, then you wouldn't be advertising it. It says a lot more if and like I think what's his name who's the lead singer of Wham who died, George Michael.
hmm
um and he was actually like a great guy from the perspective of I think he donated millions to I can't remember if it was like an AIDS charity or an African charity for poverty, but he never wanted to be named, and it only came out after when he died.
hmm
Because it says so much about it that like you really care because you're not looking for gratification or like external gratification from like society. You're
Sure.
just doing it for the sake of like trying to help.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the moment you get anybody else involved, you can argue that they're doing it because they want to be seen.
Mm,
Um, but I'll tell you an interesting point which you haven't thought about, which is this idea that actually giving money for them is no big deal.
yeah,
It's essentially a bank transfer.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
if they actually cared, they'd be on the ground helping out with the money they've been donating. Do you get me?
yeah,
Like, it's very easy when you have like £10 million. I mean, in fact, it's not easy. I guess you still have to decide you're going to give up a large amount of money, which would be life changing for most people. But it's very easy to be like, right, I got 10 million. I'm going to give 1 million to this charity, and all I'm going to do is write a check, and I'm going to then promote myself, saying, "Oh wow, I just wrote this guy a check," and then sort of bask in my own glory.
it goes back to the effort that you were talking about just before with art. It's like, if it's difficult and you're getting hands on and you're actually helping out, like if you didn't have much money and you gave money, that would be difficult. If you're a billionaire and you only give like, £1,000, then it's absolutely nothing. It's like, it's got to be relative. If you're going to like show that you're charitable, realistically, it should be relative to your circumstances. Um,
Sure. I think to finish off this quite nicely is this idea that like we're motivated mainly to appear generous, not simply to be
yeah.
generous, because we get social rewards for that. And then I think this idea that charity is an advertisement is pretty interesting. It's also a great way of I don't know if you've heard of the red herring and rhetoric, which is kind of like you create a new issue to take away from the topic of something else. So somebody could say, "Oh, you're a selfish person," but you're like, "Oh, but I donated this to charity." Do you get me? It's kind of like a get out of free jail card for rich people
Yeah.
to feel better about themselves and to be like when people sort of go, "Wow, how come you've been sort of putting all your money in a tax haven?" It'd be like, "Well, look, I gave money to charity." It's kind of what they all do.
It's kind of like holding like a false trait. It's
Yes,
like a false
exactly.
positive trait to be like, oh no, but I've still got these three good cards. I've still given charity, like you said.
If you think about it to a deeper level as well, it's all about this deniability. It's all
Yeah,
about hedging. It's hedging your bets so that when somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, you're doing this because this," you'd be like, "Oh, well, look, here's the opposite." Like somebody comes to you and says, "You're doing this because you're really selfish," and you can be like, "Oh, well, but I'm not because I did this." And I think that's just like a classic thing
and you
people tend
can't
to do.
disprove it
They
because
hedge.
then, yeah,
Of course, what is it? Well, it's inherently unprovable as well, really. Like, um, but yeah, that's all I got for
yeah,
charity.
same here. I think the next one is education. Would you like to start us off?
Okay, yeah, I think their main point was that education has become um, more of a signaling contest than anything else. Rather than actually, it's become less of like trying to educate people and more to try and credential people,
Yeah.
which I don't just hear from this book, I hear from a lot of other people as well. Like, I think I don't know if they use Peter Thiel in the book, but in my notes I've got Peter Thiel down here, and they talk about zero-sum competition within the top US colleges. This whole idea of being exclusive to these top colleges and encourages a lot of competition.
Yeah.
They also talked about schools. In fact, they talked about the origin of schools. Sorry, originally in the industrial age, was to create habits of bodily hygiene, cleanliness, social and domestic manners. And now that it's kind of not really fit for purpose, but over time as well, it's evolved into this idea of like credentialing people based on social status as well. For example, if you go to Harvard, you are seen as like the
Yeah. Yeah.
top of the creme de la creme. It's an easy way of creating like a hierarchy.
Yeah.
So I think their main point was like, for example, in fact, you know what? A good example is if you ask most people whether you go to uni, quite a lot of it, especially if they're not going to one of the big
Just to
ones,
get a
is actually
degree.
just no. Do you know what? It's not even that, mate. They just have a good time. Like genuinely, you
Oh yeah.
ask loads of people why are you at uni. So, like for example, people who don't want to go to uni next year because they're not going to get the uni experience because of
But
coronavirus.
yeah.
But mate, I'm not convinced people want degrees unless, of course, they want to go to the best universities first of all. The degree is the side part because the degree all it does is tick a box. Do you get like
Yeah.
my point is you don't want a degree, you want what a degree gets you, and that's prestige.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 No.
If you
Absolutely.
kind of get me,
Absolutely.
nobody goes, wakes up and goes like right from the beginning of like the world, like sorry, when you're about to apply to uni, so you don't go, yeah, I really fancy getting a degree in business. No, I want that degree because then it shows I'm capable and I'm great and I've got
Well,
my
the thing
life
is,
together.
we don't measure the acquisition of knowledge. It's like we don't measure like someone's knowledge level. We measure like if you were to be given an ultimatum, okay, you could either go and learn this degree but not actually get it, or you could go and learn it and get the degree. Most people are going to pick the degree. And the same, it's like on a personal level, but also on like uh, anyone hiring anyone for a job. You know, it's like
Yeah,
like you said, a credential. It's a way for them to like be like, oh, we hired them because well they had this degree and it showed that they could do the job. We didn't know that they weren't going to be able to do it. So
yeah,
and like I think he talks about in terms of like workload. So, for
mm,
instance, if you got 3 A stars, it doesn't necessarily say that like you're amazing at those subjects, but it does say that you were able to do 3 subjects with a lot of work all at once and maintain like a high level. You know,
yeah.
and I think that's basically it because you're not going to be doing the same exact stuff when you get hired at a job, um, but you will be doing work.
You learn so much and then you end up never doing what you learn.
Yeah,
Like the whole university system based on like, I studied geography for 4 years to then go into bloody finance. It's just like, well, what the
yeah,
hell did you study geography then for those years? So there might be people who argue like, it set me up for like the ability to study and be self motivating and stuff like
yeah,
that. But realistically, you've just wasted a lot of money in my
yeah.
head
Oh,
learning
so
stuff that
much.
doesn't matter.
Um, I relate it a lot to uh, the book How to Read a Book, in terms of like I think schools and universities they teach for like information rather than understanding, and that just says it all. It's like, oh, you just need to memorize these dates, but you don't need
Yeah.
to know why these dates happened
Yeah,
or
yeah.
what happened in these dates.
But it's the information action fallacy that BJ Fogg talks about. It's this idea that the government thinks that just giving you the information is enough to get you to act. So, oh wow, the whole country's a beast. Right, eat 5 portions of veg. Okay, great. You've told me what to do. You haven't told me how to do it.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
It's the same with fucking coronavirus. Oh, everybody's socially distanced. You've told us what to do, but you haven't actually created any sort of motivation to act on it. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
arguably there should be the motivation to protect people, right? But that's just a really shameless understanding of human behavior. They clearly don't have any idea how people actually think,
yeah,
especially when people already distrust you. But anyway, um, it's this whole idea that you just give somebody a PowerPoint presentation, you show them the information, you think, wow, right, they just definitely dissolved all that, and now they can figure it all out, and they understand quantum physics. Yeah, my ass.
Hmm.
That stuff took people a lifetime to figure out. I don't think showing them a lecture one week is going to distill everything that
Yeah,
that
no,
theory
exactly.
has. Um, so yeah, it's pretty nuts that we even think that, and that's like I honestly believe to my core that the only reason why we have very few exceptional people is because they are still stuck in that mindset of just like information. Like
Yeah.
you obviously have these few people that change the world, but if you were actually teaching the way that they were learning, like with infinite curiosity and trying to understand, you'd actually have a lot more of this and a lot more progress happening. But because it's all about credentialism and it's all about like just showing them the information and people think they understand it, you bypass the understanding and you end up with a load of charlatans trying to give advice to people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's yeah, it needs to change. Otherwise, it's just going to just continue on. And it's like look at it now in terms of in terms of when we would talk about friendships and how like friends try to make themselves different from acquaintances by showing that they really like you, and good friends do something above that. It's
Mhm.
kind of the same with degrees now. Like if you go back 30 years ago to like the 80s, a degree was a big thing, and now it's like people are getting degrees, and and then they're getting masters, and now people are getting two masters. And it's like, at what point do you like stop trying to outdo someone else just in order to like get a job, for instance? But it's all a way of just signaling your credentials and how like the prestige, like you said, because you can't measure someone's like knowledge. You don't know how smart someone is. But if someone was to say like, "Oh, this is a professor," then straight away you're like, oh, "Okay, he's probably smart," you know?
Yeah, but I think on the topic for another podcast is this idea that, like from what I've been reading recently, you can be smart at something but still not know the truth, because basically what smart is coming up with like amazing ability to reason things, like so
Yeah,
an amazing ability to explain things. Um, but explaining things doesn't mean it's true, as we've now
yeah,
found out that the whole point of explaining something is to give yourself pro-social reasons, and like your explaining wasn't evolved to find truth, it was evolved to convince people that why you did something was like a good reason, or you chose a good reason to do something. So essentially your reasoning is actually just a liar, it's an inherent liar within you. So yeah, that's besides the point. Let's move on to medicine because we got
yeah,
slightly
yeah,
sidetracked.
yeah,
um, I mean, the only bit I got was this idea that most published medical research is wrong, because once again, even in medicine as well, we have humans, sorry, studying, researching. They want to claim like breakthrough ideas. They want to be famous for solving big problems.
yeah, yeah,
And what their point was with this eagerness to be the first person to solve something leads to medical research being leaked to the press
yeah,
with very um, positive and great sounding like research and conclusions, which haven't been fully tested. So what you then have is the public thinking that like the cure for cancer is coming soon, because one medical journalist or one medical researcher decided it would be a good idea to present his study without actually being peer reviewed, because he wants the fame
yeah.
of curing something.
Well, because otherwise there's a risk that it could be wrong if he like
Yeah.
actually and looks at other like possible circumstances. But yeah, no, it's very true, and it makes it become like pseudoscience, but pseudoscience then becomes science because that's what the media says it is.
Well, yeah, it's what's I think it was Joseph Goebbels, the bloody Hitler's propaganda minister, says that if you repeat something enough, it becomes truth.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what this bloody media do. They repeat stuff until it becomes absolute truth in your head, and then you can't question it. Think about vitamin C. I mean, the book I was just telling you about the good calories, bad calories, and the whole idea of fat being bad. That's another example of
yeah,
people believing
that's
that
a
to be the
massive
truth, when
one.
in reality it's the hidden hormonal imbalance from taking too many carbohydrates, which is what causes people to be obese.
Yeah,
And actually, the laziness comes from being obese and the hormonal imbalance, rather than actually the laziness causing the obesity, which I thought was a really interesting point.
yeah. Well, the thing is, like, how can anyone challenge it if they don't have any other comparison or anything to compare it to? So it's like their first idea of this, their first anchor to, fats being bad, like what fats are, and then the media says that they're bad for you. That's the only thing that you have to go off. So everyone believes it, and then by the time other like disconfirming evidence comes around, no one wants to believe it.
No,
It's still said today. Like I think people kind of know it, but at the same time, people are still like, "Oh, it's fat, like fats." Obviously, there's different types of fats, but
people hold on to their beliefs very tightly. It's
yeah,
kind of a I'm still
well, it's
bemused by
because
it
they
because
become part of their identity.
I guess so. Anyway, I that was all I have for medicine, mate. I think we
Yeah,
should.
no, I didn't have much. Apart from like, it's pretty obvious to like, kind of see that there's a pretty and an ugly motive. Like, obviously, you might care about helping people, but at the same time, it does bring a lot of prestige. Being a doctor is what pretty much the highest classed career that you could get. Like you study this is another, going back to like, the education, you're studying for 6 years, 5, 6 years, then you have F1, F2, where you're working kind of like a bitch doctor in in hospitals, and then you specialize for like 5 years in a different subject. So that's what, like, 13 years or so. Um, and it brings so much like prestige, and it's very difficult, and you're going to get this more and more, like the better we start to know a certain field, the more we're going to be specializing, and the more time that will take, because you'll need to go acquire all the knowledge and then specialize. So it takes a lot of time, but being a doctor, you get a lot of money. um, you're seen as a very like intelligent person.
I don't think it's the money or the intelligence, really. I think the biggest thing about it is the fact that you're saving people's lives, hence why it's so
Yeah.
venerated. It's like you're the ultimate pro-social person. You're putting your life on the line to save other people. Not always putting your life on the line, but potentially with infectious
No,
diseases.
but that's the pretty motive.
Yeah,
That's pretty, like, people don't say like, oh, I'm becoming a doctor because just for the money. Those are the ugly motives. That's what I mean. Like,
yeah, which is why people hide it. Yeah, no, agreed.
yeah. So
100%.
that, yeah, that's pretty much what I had on
Um,
medicine.
I think we've got two left, so let's race through it. We got religion. I think for me, the main takeaway was this idea that religion leads to social rituals which reinforce the belief
Mm,
and get a high level of conformity. Like I think I was this wasn't from this book, but it was. I think it might have either been The Righteous Mind or something similar. Like the whole point of religion is like is actually a very useful human tool in
yeah.
bringing about a cohesive society because it gets people to follow same rituals, believe in the same things, and brings people together. Really, it sort of unites, but it also divides in a way. If you, of course, if you look at sort of like what's it
All
called,
the
the
wars
crusade,
against.
the
Yeah.
crusades, etc. This idea that in a tight knit community, having the same rituals can bind people together is quite interesting, and this idea that the rituals are like barriers to groups. Like you can only be part of this group if you're shown to do the rituals, which is kind of back to this whole idea of like how human groups bond.
They're kind of just like written down norms in a way, aren't they? It's like, this is
But they're visibly followed.
but they're
Sorry, I think that's
yeah,
the point.
visibly followed, and it's once again the idea of like, you want to compete against others, you want to show that you're more worthwhile than others, hence why you get like really intense fanatical religious people who like whip themselves and do those kinds of things, and like hurt themselves in the sight of God, um, just to show that they're more into it than others. And
Yeah,
so like it keeps everyone in this circle because everyone's trying to compete to stay in the circle,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
keeps everyone accountable.
I think the visibility thing is really important with religion because when you show that you're doing like a particular behavior in front of people, such as going to church every week, you are visibly giving people like the feedback loop of like this is important. I'm doing it. Like the moment somebody steps out of that, you start realizing that it's not as important to them as they once said,
Yeah.
or you start feeling like there's a visible
You
divide.
want to be seen doing, like, competing and like being all for it, because then it shows that you're more into it than someone that hasn't been seen doing it.
Yeah,
And I think like an aspect of that, when we talk about self-deception in the previous one, a way to show like, do you believe in what you're actually
mm.
praising, and the only way to like show that you're more into it than someone else is to really
Ah,
believe it. So your mind basically makes you believe these kinds of things in order to
I also guess it's harder to lie.
yeah, exactly, because it's like,
You know what I mean? It's hard to lie that you believe in something when you actually act on it. You're not just saying, "Oh, I'm religious. I go to church every Sunday." You actually go to church every Sunday because if you didn't, people call you out. Whereas, yeah, it's hard to lie to your in group. Maybe is the best way of doing it.
and like the credulous belief of it means that like you're worthy of staying in. So it's a way of kind of like filtering out, like you can either get out and not believe this, or you stay in but you believe it, and so like unless you don't, then it's very easy to see, I reckon,
Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
not really into it. um
Let's go on to politics.
Last one, politics.
I mean, what did I get from this? I got this idea that beliefs are loyalty symbols. Um, so I think his idea was like we can't follow the facts and listen to reason. We believe this because it's like this is because of this, and basically politics is almost like the new religion to a degree because you are showing your belief in something to show your loyalty to a group
Hmm.
and how far you go for it.
Yeah.
Um, and his argument was, I don't know, this doesn't account for everybody's politics or whatever, but the people who are all very extreme either far right, far left. They believe things like beyond reason because that less loyal people wouldn't believe, and they believe it's like it's about loyalty rather than anything else.
Yeah.
Like,
Shows your dedication.
yeah, if you're not this dedicated, then you're not loyal.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of what you're seeing now with the Black Lives Matter and stuff. Like, if you're not as loyal as we are, you're racist.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're against us, but it's like that's kind of like tribal dividing once again. It's signaling loyalty is the only way you can, and the only way you can signal loyalty is by showing off that you believe in the things they believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Or believe the things that like others wouldn't. You
Yeah,
know, you're going that extra distance.
yeah, because you're so committed to the cause that you're willing to, distort, or not distort things, but you're willing to go past where everybody else stops because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a vendetta almost.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of what I got from there, and it's also like, yeah, I think that was it for politics.
Which is quite dangerous when you think about it.
What? Sorry, which bit?
It's quite dangerous in terms of like, you're just to signal something, you will believe in something that isn't believable, and then that signals to others that they might need to try and believe it as well to compete. Um, and so it ends up like distorting everyone's kind of beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite dangerous. I keep thinking about how fragile like the social fabric is,
Yeah.
because all it takes is like a really charismatic leader, and people just get a bit carried away, and then
Yeah.
you've got like a bloody civil war in your car, especially if you've got guns in their hands. But
Yeah.
um, for me, that was it for politics.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
shame that it's slowly got less and less, but I guess that almost shows where our sort of mind was in the sort of consumption, conversation, and charity and education, really,
Yeah.
in my
True.
head.
Like I think they're all. It's basically just the concept of redoing itself in all of them. They're all pretty similar. Like you're showing a pretty motive, but you've actually got an ugly motive going on, and it's just how you get around.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Yeah, like, to honestly, like, we could just go back through all of them. Like, yeah, with conversation, the pretty motive is you're just talking and you're just trying to discuss things, find truth, but in reality, conversation can actually be the ugly motive, is you showing off like what you're doing. Same with consumption, you give them pretty sort of motive, saying like, oh, I did this because,
I bought this because it shows that I'm this kind of person.
or yeah, exactly. It's the same with art. I'm doing this, um and you're almost showing off your ability to do something to a degree. Like, by the way, we're not actually saying these like selfish motives are bad. It's just sort of bringing attention to it. It's the same with charity. Like, fuck, we need these motives to make people actually give the charity. So don't get me wrong. It's just bringing them to the actual attention of people instead of thinking, wow, he's such a charitable bloke. It's like, actually put your skeptical hat on for 1 second and
Yeah.
try and think of it in a different way.
And the thing is, it's not the be all and end all. It's not there's not just only one motive ever going on.
Of course, there is pro-social motives. Like, they do want to help people. It's just they also want to earn a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if like, well, this is a bit off topic, but if you're in like a capitalistic society where your life evolves around money, then what are you supposed to just ignore it? No, like, this book is basically, as you just said, it's basically shining a spotlight on other reasons for why we do things.
Yeah. Yeah, and the stuff which people might want to sort of sweep under the rug and pretend doesn't exist because it's not sexy.
Yeah. It just gives us like an upper hand in terms of like thinking, okay, well, why are you actually doing this? Break it down. There's not just one reason for doing it. What's your other
Yeah,
reasons?
I mean, obviously, I think one of the things I don't want to sort of preach. I mean, probably should have said at the beginning is like you don't want to jump to like the negative
Yeah,
conclusion, like, oh, everybody's just a selfish
yeah,
prick and
yeah,
nobody wants to
exactly.
help anybody else. It's just understanding that there's like a mix, and like nobody really is pure
Yeah,
to a degree. And what like, but who says selfishness is bad if it benefits
yeah,
other people, right?
exactly. I think you picked up on a very good point last week when you said, in a capitalistic society, capitalism works because people are selfish, yet they all work together selfishly.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, but then there's like a limit to that, because some people then so the selfish interests sometimes don't coincide with the group interests,
Yeah,
but that's when the argument for government should step in, right? So like the selfish interest of promoting cigarette sales is the collective interest is not in smoking, because that would cause the collective higher taxes because of doing the NHS, etc. Right?
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's like a balancing act, right? It's
yeah, exactly.
but yeah,
Yeah.
cool. But that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. If you did, make sure you leave a comment or a review. And if you want to know more about what we do, or you want to read any of our book summaries, head on over to wisewords.blog. And if you feel like staying wise throughout the week, why not follow us on Instagram at @WiseWordsSummaries? I guarantee you'll love what you see. Anyway, guys, until next time, have a good one.